Hey everybody, hope you're all having a great morning. So, I had a couple of videos kind of blow up a little bit on TikTok. I'm not saying blow up like millions, but one has like over 10,000 views and another one's got like over 14,000. That's not blowing up. That's just starting to get a little big. But anyways, with that, with a lot of views comes a lot of comments and messages. So someone had sent me a message and then they commented, and they were like from one of those true scary story type deals, and they were like, what is something about you that's true but you don't like to admit? And I was like, oh, interesting, let me think about that. And something that is true but that I don't like to admit is the fact that I am blood related to Pee-wee Gaskins. Yes, the serial killer of South Carolina. It is it is just one of those things that's, you don't want to tell people. You don't want to relate yourself to that or that name. Look at the BTK killer, his daughter. She's nothing like that. But because she's his daughter, she caught hell for years, and people were insinuating that the wife knew, the daughter knew. What? A lot of these serial killers don't tell anybody what they're doing because they don't want to get caught. They're damn sure not going home telling their families. Now, there are some who work with their spouses and did this stuff, but most of them don't because they don't want to get caught. They're embarrassed, they're ashamed, blah, 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 whatever. But we're going to talk about Pee-wee Gaskins and just how horrible and evil of a person he really was. Now, this is not a close relation. This is distant, way on back in the bloodline. So, Donald Henry Pee-wee Gaskins Jr., born Donald Henry Parrott Jr., was born March 13th, 1933, died September 6, 1991, was an American serial killer, rapist, and cannibal from South Carolina. As a young man, Gaskins was repeatedly arrested for robbery and rape. In 1955, he escaped from prison and found work with the traveling carnival. I've worked for the fair like 6 different times. I worked for like the county fair. That makes me, sometimes when you're kin to people like this, it makes you afraid that you're going to end up being this way. And even though we're not that way, it still puts a fear in you that's like, oh my gosh, was that bad thought that I had make me like that person? Am I dark? Is my soul going to be dark like that person's soul? Or, it makes you just freak out a little bit. Like, am I going to be that evil too? But no, you're not. It's like a panic. And that's what happens to me a lot. I can be in Walmart and I get very frustrated when people are standing in the middle of the aisle and they won't move out of the way. They'll just stand there and keep talking, and I can't get through and I can't get around, and I start thinking, what if I just shove my buggy into theirs? And I'm like, no, that's a bad thought. Don't think stuff like that. That's the kind of thoughts that make me feel like, hey, is this where I get it from? I don't know. Anywho, he found work with the traveling carnival. Gaskins was charged in 1976 with 8 charges of murder after an associate told police officers that he had confessed to multiple murders. Police found 8 buried bodies on his property in Prospect, South Carolina. While awaiting the death sentence in prison, Gaskins killed a fellow inmate on death row with a small explosive. He was put to death on September 6, 1991. How the hell did he get a small explosive while on death row? That sounds like that's got some kind of, backstory itself. Like, who? Somebody had to help him. Gaskins was born in Florence County, South Carolina. That's our county. We love Florence. To Eula Parrott, the last in the string of illegitimate children, he was small for his age and immediately gained a nickname Pee-wee. As an adult, he was between 5'4" and 5'5". He weighed approximately 130 pounds. I weigh more than Pee-wee Gaskins did, y'all. I'm like 5'5", I think. Oh God, we were the same height and weight. That's stress. My anxiety is just peaking. I don't know why. I know it's not time to be funny, but I have to bring light to a dark situation like this, or else it'll just freak me out. Gaskins' early life was characterized by a great deal of neglect. When he was 1 year old, Gaskins drank a bottle of kerosene, which caused him to have convulsions until he was 3 years old. His mother apparently took so little interest in him that the first time he learned his given name, Donald, was when it was read out in his first court appearance. For a crime spree, Gaskins committed along with a group of fellow delinquents, which included robberies, assaults, and gang rape. Following his conviction for his role in the crime spree, Gaskins was sent to reform school. Now, they done this a lot back in the day. They would, take juveniles or children who would get into big trouble and send them to a reform school, and it didn't really teach them a lesson usually. And he was released in 1951 at the age of 18. Gaskins briefly worked on a tobacco plantation until 1953 arrest after he attacked a teenage girl with a hammer and for an alleged assault. Gaskins was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment at the South Carolina Penitentiary. Being in prison, he earned his fellow prisoners' respect by killing the most feared man in prison, Hazel Brazel. As a result, Gaskins received an extra 3 years. That was it. But from that point on, he became the aggressor instead of the victim. He escaped from prison in 1955 by hiding in the back of a garbage truck and fled to Florida, where he took employment with the Traveling Carnival. He was rearrested, remanded to custody, and paroled in August of 1961. How the heck did he kill someone and then turn around 3 years later and get out? I guess maybe the laws were different back then. There was a lot of crooked stuff going on in prisons back then too, though. If a prison guard wanted you to take somebody out, or a warden, or a judge, if they wanted you to take somebody out and you did, you'd get a shorter sentence. I mean, hell, it's still that crooked in prison nowadays. Following his release from prison, Gaskins reverted to committed burglaries and fencing stolen property. 2 years after his parole, he was arrested for the rape of a 12-year-old girl, but he absconded while awaiting sentence. Gaskins was sentenced in Georgia and sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment. Gaskins was paroled again in November 1968. You would think with him pulling all this time, they would just realize he's a habitual felon and lock him up for good. Gaskins' first non-prison related murder was a hitchhiker from whom he tortured and murdered in September 1969 from sinking her body in the swamp. In his memoirs, he wrote, "All I could think about is how I could do anything I wanted to her." The hitchhiker was the first of many he picked up and killed while driving around the coastal highways of the American South. Pee-wee classified these victims as coastal kills, people both male and female, whom he killed purely for pleasure, on average approximately once every 6 weeks when he went hunting to quell his feelings of bothersomeness. He tortured and mutilated his victims while attempting to keep them alive for as long as possible. He confessed to killing these victims using a variety of methods, including stabbing, suffocation, mutilation, and even claimed to have cannibalized some of them. He later confessed to killing 80 or 90 such victims, although his claims to have committed any coastal kills had never been corroborated. In his memoirs, Gaskins claims to have committed coastal kills every 6 weeks, yet contradicts this claim later in the book by stating he felt the overpowering need to seek out and commit a coastal kill by the 10th date of each calendar month. Oh, sorry, my Tourette's is causing me to jerk a little bit and my mouth to clench. But that's interesting. In his mind, he claims anyways, he wanted to kill on the 10th of every month, but then he claims he killed every 6 weeks. But in his brain, he probably couldn't calculate weeks. He didn't. If it was true that he didn't know his first legal name until he went to his first court appearance, then he probably couldn't do math in his head with weeks either. Does that make sense? He probably didn't know what the hell he was talking about when he was saying, "Oh, I did this every 6 weeks, but the 10th of every month." That to him probably didn't. It don't make sense to us, but to him it probably did seem like a month. I don't know. In November 1970, Gaskins committed his first so-called serious murders. People whom he knew and killed for personal reasons. Pee-wee's first serious murder victims were his own niece, Janice Kirby, age 15, and her friend, Patricia Alsbrook, age 17, both of whom he beat to death after attempting to sexually assault them in Sumter, South Carolina. Other serious murder victims were killed for a variety of reasons, because they had mocked Gaskins, attempted to blackmail him, owed him money, allegedly stole it from him, or because Gaskins had been paid to kill his victim. Now, these are all alleged claims by him for why he killed them. We don't know for a fact that they bullied him or picked on him or blackmailed him or assaulted him. We don't know that. This man was deemed the most evil man alive. So he probably did it just for a fix, just to get his rocks off because he wanted to. That was probably why. Unlike his coastal kills, Gaskins simply executed these victims usually by shooting them before burying them around the coastal areas of South Carolina. In 1973, he committed one of his more gruesome murders when he raped and murdered two of his neighbors, Doreen Dempsey, 23 years old and 8 months pregnant, and her 2-year-old daughter. Oh my God. That is so horrible. Nobody suspected that Pee Wee was a sadistic serial killer, but there were some who knew that he was prepared to commit murder for a reasonable reward. In February 1975, a woman named Suzanne Kipper Owens hired Gaskins to kill her boyfriend, Silas Barnwell Yates. In order to cover up the murder, Gaskins ended up killing 4 more times. His final arrest. He was arrested on November 14th, 1975, when a criminal associate named Walter Neely confessed to police that he witnessed Pee Wee killing Dennis Bellamy, age 28, and Johnny Knight, age 15. Neely confessed to police that Pee Wee had confided in him to having killed several people who had been listed as missing persons during the previous 5 years, and had indicated to him where they were buried. On December 4th, 1975, Gaskins led police to land owned and Prospect, where police discovered the bodies of 8 of his victims. Now, while he was imprisoned and tried on the 8 charges of murder on May 24th, 1976, he was found guilty. On May 28th, he was sentenced to death, which was later commuted to life in prison when South Carolina General Assembly, their 1974 ruling on capital punishment was changed to conform the U.S. Supreme Court guidelines for the death penalty in other states. But why should we, when they know that this person is a serial killer, why should they get to lay up in prison for the rest of their life? I don't know. On September 2nd, 1982, Gaskins committed another murder for which he earned the title the meanest man in America while incarcerated in the high-security block at South Carolina Correctional Institute. Gaskins killed a fellow death row inmate named Rudolph Tyner, who had received his sentence for killing an elderly couple during a bungled armed robbery of their store in Bergs. Gaskins was hired to commit this murder by Tony Simo, the son of Tyner's victims. Damn. So he was hired by the victim's family? But on death row, how would he... Was he not on 23-hour lockdown? Was he just put with everyone else? I mean, back then was different in prison, so he was probably put with everyone else, in the prison. He probably wasn't in, the hole or, like a lockdown, 23-hour lockdown or nothing. He was probably in the regular units with the other prisoners. Pee Wee initially made several unsuccessful attempts to kill Tyner by lacing his food and drink with poison before he opted to use explosives to kill him. How did he get this stuff, though? But I guess back then they could sneak it in easier. To accomplish this, Pee Wee rigged a device similar to a portable radio in Tyner's cell and told Tyner this would allow them to communicate between cells. When Tyner followed Gaskins' instructions to hold the speaker, it was laden with C4 plastic explosive, and being noticed to his ear at an agreed time, Gaskins detonated the explosives from his cell and killed Tyner. He later said the last thing he heard was Pee Wee laughing. The last thing that Tyner heard was Pee Wee laughing. Pee Wee was tried for Tyner's murder and sentenced to death. It was the first time in history of South Carolina that a white man was sentenced to death for the murder of a black man. While on death row, Gaskins, claiming to have committed between 100 to 110 murders, including that of Margaret Peg Coutinho, the 13-year-old daughter of then South Carolina State Senator James Coutinho, Jr. of Sumter. Gaskins was executed on September 6, 1991 at 1:10 a.m. in the electric chair, hours after he tried to kill himself by slitting his wrist. His last words were, "I'll let my lawyers talk for me. I'm ready to go." They really didn't believe him when he said that he killed the senator's daughter, Margaret Coutinho, but it makes you wonder, did he? And that's something that we need to look up too. The senator, it seems like his daughter was missing for some time. Senator James Coutinho, Jr. of Sumter. Let's look that up. Hold on 1 minute. So apparently a serial killer named William Pierce is who killed Peg Cotino, Margaret Cotino. They call her Peg. William Joseph Jr. Pierce, they called him Jr., born 1931, died May 31st, 2020, was an American criminal and serial killer who committed a series of at least 9 murders in 3 states from June 1970 to 1971. After his capture, he admitted guilt, was convicted, and sentenced to several terms of life imprisonment. In 1974, Pierce refuted his confession, but all of his subsequent appeals for a retrial were denied. Let's see. Let's find this part. Okay. I think I got it right there. In 1970, Pierce surfaced in the city of North August, South Carolina. On June 27th, with the aim of robbery, he entered a home and came upon 18-year-old Ann Godwin, a babysitter looking after the neighbor's children for the evening. He sexually assaulted and shot her after a struggle. She later died in the hospital. He stole a number of valuables from the home as well. On December 18th, 13-year-old Margaret Peg Cotino left her home in Sumter, South Carolina at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon to have lunch with her sister at school. When she did not show up after 45 minutes, her parent, State Representative James Cotino, and his wife reported her missing. Peg's body was found December 30th, 10 miles away from where she was last seen. During the forensic autopsy, it was determined that she had been beaten and suffocated to death. On December the 20th, 2 days after Cotino's disappearance, Pierce drove to a service station in Georgia where he shot 59-year-old employee Joe Fletcher, stealing $78 from the cash register. On January the 12th the following year, he robbed a store in Sopperton, and then, in order to get rid of any witnesses, Pierce shot a 51-year-old Lacey Tigpin, the store's administrator. 10 days later, he abducted 32-year-old Helen Wilcox near a store in Hazelhurst. He took the woman into the woodlands outside the city where he sexually assaulted her. We'll call it rape. He raped her. And then shot Wilcox, burying her corpse in a shallow grave where it was discovered a few days later. On January 28th, Pierce committed another robbery at the store in Baxley, in which he killed 60-year-old store owner Vivian Miles and brutally beat her 5-year-old granddaughter, oh my God, who suffered severe head injury but managed to survive. While fleeing the crime scene, he was spotted by a truck driver named Joe Overstreet. Pierce attempted to kill Overstreet by firing at him twice at close range and then fled. Overstreet was unarmed and would later give police a description of his attacker. Capture and confessions. On the afternoon of March 8, 1971, Pierce was arrested soon after robbing a gas station in Baxley. He was taken to the police station where he was interrogated many hours, resulting in him confessing to 6 murders. That included Ann Godwin of North Augusta, South Carolina, and Peg Cotino, South Carolina, Sumter. In addition, he confessed to 3 other homicides, an abduction and strangulation of 17-year-old Kathy Jo Anderson, who went missing December 1970 from Columbia, South Carolina, and was later discovered in a wooded area February 17, 1971. The August 21st, 1970 handgun slaying of 20-year-old Virginia Carol Maines in Gastonia, North Carolina, and finally on August 10th, 1970, while robbing a service station in Beaufort, North Carolina, he hacked to death a 60-year-old employee, James Sayers, with an axe before stealing $970 and fleeing. So he definitely got around North and South Carolina a lot during his crime spree. He died in prison May 2020. There's a series on Netflix, Mindhunter, which was about Pierce. In 2019, Pierce appeared in the 2nd season of the Netflix series Mindhunter, in which he was portrayed by Michael Flipowich. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So, it makes you wonder. Pee-wee claims to have killed Peg Cotino, but William Pierce also claims to have killed Peg Cotino, who was the senator's daughter. You know, it's such an evil world. It really is. When you have so many evil people, you just never know. You really don't. And to be distantly related, it makes you just want to throw up and cringe. It really does. It's nothing to brag about. It's nothing to tell everybody about. But I'd rather tell people before, somebody like researches and like, oh, you were kin, you didn't say anything, blah, blah, blah. I just rather, I know. It's not close blood relation, and I'm not bragging about it. It's not something to brag about. like I told you guys, I'm going to be real with you, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm just going to tell you the truth, because I'm that kind of person. I'd rather you just be blunt, and I just tell you the truth. And I expect that back to me too, you know? Let's just all be honest with each other about everything. But, Pee Wee Gaskins really was a very evil, disgusting person. My papa used to tell me stories about him, and they were really, really disturbing. I'll have to do a video on that. I put some on TikTok, but I'll do some more soon. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys.